All right. It's been a while since we've dove deep into a topic, and I just want to say something about it. This is intended to be a practical series. So I want this to be a study where we are diving into the kind of nitty-gritty practical sides of things. And so the way I'm going to frame this whole series for the next few weeks up until we get to Parents United is I want to give you the biblical principles around each of these topics. Now, I essentially created a series title name and topics that will give you a little clues of what I'm talking about, but won't tell you everything. That way you just show up, and you don't get to know what it's about. So you'll figure it out maybe if you're a sleuth and you look at the titles, but I want you just to come and let's talk about each of these issues as we go through. And I called it this because I wanted to. There's no real other strong reason. I wanted to call it Say What because they're all phrases, and phrases are things you say. Okay. I want to go through this series in a practical way, like I said, give you some biblical principles. I want to give you some ideas about these biblical principles of how to implement these things into your life and your parenting relationship with your kids. And then I really want to give you enough time to go spend a good amount of time with your group to have a conversation, because I do believe that there is a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and application in this room, and I want that to be something that we do regularly in our small groups during this parenting season, to be able to bounce ideas off of each other, come up with some new concepts, maybe some things that we haven't thought about before, hear what other parents are doing around each of these. So, to start off our series tonight, our initial one is what I'm calling Get to Work, a phrase that I think all of us need to make sure that we are saying to our kids, because we know that we are living in a time and in a culture and in a season where hard work, value for work is declining more and more and more. And if you have a teenager, you know that the natural propensity of a teenager, for most of the time, is that your kids want to continue to be lazy, sleep in, not do as much work, rest, hang out with their friends, not put in the effort and the work. And it's a big parenting effort for you to push them forward and drive them to work. But just to make it even worse for us, so that you can know kind of the general tenor of what's going on in our society, I have a little bit of information and stats about this generation that is coming up and their view and thinking and values on work. So let me throw some things up here for you that I'll read to you, okay? First of all, let me say this. The generation, Gen Z, and the kids that are, and Gen Z has a big broad range here, and we still got the teenagers still in that range. This Gen Z is the best educated generation there has ever been, is how it's been phrased right now, which means that they're less likely to drop out of high school, they're more likely to enroll and get into a college, and they're more likely to graduate with a degree from a four-year college or university. All of that tends to be the case. Education is high. And yet, there does seem to be an interesting correlation. I can't say that this is caused by this, but what we used to always say, and I think was normal for us, is we want our kids to go to school and be highly educated so that they can be someone who proves themselves. They prove themselves in the classroom, they prove themselves in the workforce. Well, now all of a sudden this relationship is not so much true, because we have the biggest generation of educated kids and we're seeing some of the lowest levels of work involvement and engagement. And so we're starting to see some interesting things going on here that are standard model of work hard in school, go to college, do this, and that will make you a good employee. People will look at you and say, yeah, you finished a four-year college degree, therefore I know you have some stick-to-itiveness and you will persevere and get through your job. Doesn't reveal itself in the stats, because it's already showing one of the things that this has done by natural consequences, because more young students are going to college. We're having, young people enter into the workforce early. So because more kids are being educated and highly educated, we're having less teenagers and young adults enter into the workforce. So just to show you a little chart here, that blue, the light blue here is the 15 to 17-year-olds, and the purple is the 18 through 22-year-olds. And you can see that in Gen X, we had about 41% of 15 to 17-year-olds in the workforce and 79% in the ages of 18 to 22 in the workforce. It declines in the millennial generation to 71% and 27%. And now in Gen Z, we have a mere 62% of 18 to 22-year-olds in the workforce. We're getting close to that halfway mark, and we're down below 20. We're at 18% of 15 to 17-year-olds. So the days where it was very common for our kids to jump into the workforce in their young teenage years, like many of you probably did, started working when you were 14, 15, 16, getting summer jobs and doing all that, is declining as each progressive generation goes through, successive generations. So we're seeing a general trend here of this, mainly because of the education, but think about the impact that has on teenagers. They're doing school, but we're also seeing them work less, and then we're seeing the next few things which show that work is changing in their minds. I thought this is interesting just as I'll just leave this with you, but Gen Z is more likely than any other generations from Pew Research to want the government to solve their problems, okay? Which I think has a correlation to work very much so. I think the person that values work and sees themselves as a working individual to accomplish what God has for them to do sees themselves as the solution to solve the problems that they're facing versus looking for outside input to solve those problems. So this generation of young kids coming up right now, your kids, is more inclined to want the government to be more involved in solving the issues in the world, society, and in their personal lives. And we're at the point where it's 70% want an increase in government activity in solving our daily problems. So we're moving away from, I'm going to work hard to solve these problems and the government's going to solve them. So I think that's having a big contributing factor to all this. Here's some quotes that I pulled from a few different sites that were going through studies. Read them to you. Gen Z will transform and disrupt the workplace more than any generation. Gen Z will inspire leaders to focus on mental health, including offering mental health days as an employee benefit, okay? That's one thing. You laugh, but this is highly, highly, highly requested. One of the top things that Generation Z wants from their employee is access to mental health days. This is another quote here. Perks like gift cards, cash, mental health retreats, and wellness programs that reward Gen Z for professional performance keep Gen Z happy and working in one place. Those companies that have already implemented internal programs like this are reporting back that they are seeing popularity among their younger workers. Okay, so working for a paycheck and a job to put food on the table for your family is not enough. Now we have to give additional cash incentives and wellness retreats to make this work. An additional stat that I just thought is interesting in terms of the way that young people's thinking is changing on just general work is that people who are younger want a flexible work environment, meaning that 75% of respondents in multiple studies that I read were talking about how they prefer or will only work for a place that does remote work or hybrid work. They don't want to go into an office anymore, 75%. Some do want to go in, but it's usually split between I absolutely do not want to go in and I do want to go in only. But we're looking at a 75% saying they will only do it remote or they definitely want to have a hybrid because they want to have flexibility so that they can have this great work-life balance that everybody's talking about. All right. More than half of young professionals are likely to leave their jobs due to dissatisfaction with fulfillment. That's at 59%. Professional development, 57%. And the company providing value, 53%. Okay? So, the reasons why even our kids, our young people in the workplace are leaving their jobs, I think is different than what it used to be. Our job isn't providing our needs. I'm not able to pay the bills. I want some more, ability to rise up. We're seeing that it's not necessarily going in that direction. It's more, you get some professional development, but it's more dissatisfaction. They're stressed. They're not satisfied. They feel like they're not in the right place, and that's why they're quitting. These ones are really shocking to me. 40% of young people that are working in the workforce right now that are polled in these polls from Deloitte here say that they're planning on leaving their job in the next 2 years. I mean, the idea of longevity in positions now is gone. The ability to push through adversity when things get hard is starting to slip away. 57% plan on switching their careers due to lack of employers' efforts to make positive social impacts. Just leave that there, okay? Uh, 54% of respondents, and this is coming from employers, are saying that their Gen Zers that are working are not engaged, just completely disconnected from their work. Either fully disconnected or partially disconnected were the two options, and it's at 54%. So the vast majority of the way that this is all going is our kids are leaning away from work, leaning away from being engaged in work, and leaning away from our traditional values that we've had for work for a long time, and even something like this. Of course, 68% feeling stressed at work a lot of the time, which I would say, well, that one doesn't change a lot. But in the specific request of this question was, how much stress do you feel that is potentially going to cause you to leave your job? And they say this is 68%. So 68% of people are very concerned about this because the majority of young workers are so stressed in their job, in their workplace, that they want to leave. They can't handle the basic stress of a working environment. Okay. I think all that is quite disturbing. Do you guys agree with me? There's more that could be said. There was a lot of data I poured through, and I just pulled out some tidbits. There was a lot more. I think even more disturbing than that were these type of people. Has anybody seen these videos? Yeah. These are viral work videos of Generation Z people crying about their jobs. The one on the left, the girl, I don't know her name, and I don't want to get into it, but she is incredibly upset that she has no time for her life working a 9-to-5 job. And she's weeping and crying, and you can see there, I've got a 9-to-5. How do you have time for your life? Welcome to the real world. And this guy working at Starbucks is talking about how he feels like he's working a triple shift because he's having to work an 8-hour shift, and he's crying, wishing he could get his life back, okay? At a Starbucks, at an 8-hour shift, okay. All of you know, and I think we could all say very clearly here, we have some problems in our current generation. The trajectory of the culture of our kids is moving away from work. Work is less valued, work is less important, it's less essential to our lives, and we want to get away from it. We're trying to change our thinking about it. We expect more of our employees, less of ourselves. All these things are happening all at the same time as a general trajectory. Now, I will say that my opinion of your kids that I engage with most of the time, if you have a child raised in a Christian home, their work ethic, their value for work, their understanding of work is much better than the general culture. But you have to see, I think, based off of some of this, that there is a general trend that is going to be pulling at our kids away from work. It's going to be pulling them in a bad direction, in a negative direction. And I think that you, as a parent, need to think about countering those type of pulls from the culture to help our kids better engage and think about work. So I want you to be able to say to your kids that you need to get to work, and this needs to be a mantra for your parenting given the reality of what we're dealing with. So as a fundamental framework for any real discussion biblically of work, we have to start with this passage and say, we as believers are told and called that whatever we are doing, whatever work we are engaged in, whatever efforts we are putting our hands to, we are to do it heartily. We are to work hard with all of our might, and we're not to do it just for our own personal gain or even for the benefit of others, but as we are doing it to the Lord. This is the biblical worldview and framework of work that we should all function underneath. That we are to work as unto the Lord, and we're to do it hard. Even the sermon that I got to preach this last weekend, in our own sanctification, we're called to work hard, to show effort, to give max effort to our own sanctification. Everything that we do, we're supposed to do with maximum effort. I mean, we're to give it our all right? So this is the general framework and principle for us as Christians that say, yes, we must work hard. But I want to give you 5 things to write down to narrow down some of these thinking, some of these thoughts about your kids specifically, the culture, and how to work with them to be better at working. So let me give you a few of those. So first one is this. I think it is important for you as a parent to set the expectation that life is work. We have gotten to the place where young people seem to think that life is play, life is leisure, life is comfort, life is enjoyment, life is satisfaction, and they have somehow forgotten that life is work. I think this is because that we have advanced so much as a culture and a society and with technology that For many of our young people, they can sit around most of their days and just be in utter comfort all the time. And because they don't have that experience of adversity or hardship in their life, they think that that's the normal thing. They don't realize how much effort goes into just normal life. And so I think that one of the first things you need to do is have this be your goal in your house, that your kids, especially your teenagers, know every aspect of life includes work. And you all know this intuitively, but do your kids know this? We need to have conversations with our kids where we're saying, it doesn't matter if you just want to be a stay-at-home mom. That's a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to be a stay-at-home mom. It takes a lot of work to take and raise kids, right? Even if your kid has the aspiration of being a professional video game player, those guys put in a lot of work, okay? I know it doesn't seem like it, but they probably do, I guess. I don't know. But there's a lot of work. If you want to be an artist and you just want to draw all day, it takes a lot of work to be successful as an artist. If you want to be a professional athlete, you know how much work it takes. Your kids need to have from you an expectation set. Kids, life is work. Whatever you want to do, whatever your desire is to do, it's going to require you to work. Work is not something that you can ever get out of, is what I'm talking about. Now, your kid might not be the person that goes and gets the six-figure job. They might not be someone that even does that much work at all. Maybe they get married young, get pregnant young, and stay at home with their children. But that still requires a lot of work. So we need to set the expectation for our kids that it doesn't matter what direction your life goes, your life is going to require work. And it should require work because of that passage in Colossians. All of the things that we do, we're to work heartily at it. So even if we aren't doing a job that is bringing us income because for some reason we've struck it big or we got an inheritance or we've made $1 million selling something and now we can retire early at 30 years old, you should still put your hand as a Christian to the work that God has you to do in ministry. You should still fill up that time with good work as unto the Lord for the sake of other people. So work is something that never goes away for the Christian. And we should always know that and think that. Now, just to bring a passage up here, just to be clear in the reality of how this is functioning, work was created in the garden as good before the fall, and man was called to work. God created work and values it and says, this is part of the natural state of human beings where you're going to work. And there's an argument to be made that when we stand before the Lord in heaven or on the new earth and we are in his kingdom, we have jobs to do, assignments, work. Work is part of the natural state of the human condition, and it doesn't go away. Now, the environment, the scenario, the encasement around work might change. If we have a glorified body and no sin, the environment of work is going to change, but work is still there. So to have your kids at any point think that work is something that we can try to get out of at some point in life, or that our goal in life is to do minimal work, is contrary to the biblical narrative about work. We're to work heartily. We're to give it all of our might. We're to work with the Lord, for the Lord, and we're going to work before the fall, and we're going to work after the new creation. That's how it works. So work is essential, and they need to see it as essential. And it's also important just to recognize that the one model ideal of the person that we should all be striving to be like and conform our lives to while he was on this earth, he worked and he talked about how his Father works. And so work is something that is inherent not only to the human condition, but to the condition of God, our maker, who created us this way. He continues to work, and his Son continued to work while he was on this work. He is working. We need to work. So get your kids to think and set an expectation that their life is work. And I think one of the ways that you do it, just practically speaking here, just as a tidbit from my mind, is that we need to be a little bit better at making this reality that life is work not as big of a deal. I mean, just when we're going about talking about our daily activities with our kids or what we have to do in our work, in our ministry, in our environments, in our relationships, to just have that attitude of like, yeah, I've got to work. Of course, everyone does. Yeah, that's a lot of work, but that's normal. Everyone has to work. Every aspect of life requires work. Yeah, but it's our day off, Dad. Can't we just rest? Yeah, we can, but you know what? We need to do a little bit of work because you know what? We always got to do something. We got to work. Rest is important, but work is essential. 6 days you are to work, and 1 day you are to rest, right? That's how it goes, kid. Life is work. I mean, we need to get better at making this expectation that life is work just a standard mantra in our house. And I would also say, as a practical thing, no matter where you are with your kids, whether you got little ones still and you've got the whole ladder climbing all the way up, or you've got someone who's in a senior in high school, as early as possible, should you start getting your kids to work at anything and everything you can find them for them to do. And I really mean, I notice this with kids, and I don't just mean schoolwork, because I think there needs to be diversity in work, but the more tasks your kids can get used to putting their hand to, the better they will be at work. They need to figure out how to do laundry and clean their rooms and put dishes away and wash things off and rake leaves and blow off the driveway and do whatever you need to do, whatever work you can think of. And as they get older, that work needs to increase. You need to find things for them to do that get them working early and often. And you need to start talking to them when they're as young as you possibly can about what do you want to do for not just your career, but like what job do you want to get right out of high school? If you're a junior in high school, what do you want to do? You want to get a job? I mean, we need to talk about work like it's just like a career, job, that kind of thing, but just what are you going to put your hands to? If it's not a job, are you going to do sports? Are you going to take extra classes? We need to push our kids to do some work because it's important as a value for them to see it. Okay. Set the expectation that life is work for your kids. The second thing is this. I would say that in your home, you need to develop a culture that values work, that doesn't just treat it like it's this evil thing that God gave us, because we know it's not, because it was created pre-fall in creation for Adam to do and work the garden. But we need to develop a culture that values work, where within your home, when people talk about the jobs, the work, the tasks, the things that they have to do in their day, there is a sense of like, that's important. That's not just some thing we have to grit our teeth and bear all the time. Sometimes it is, but that there's value to it. Look at some of these Proverbs that help us think through this. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, okay? There's value there. Someone who puts their hand to work has a benefit from it. But he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense, right? If you're just not going to pursue work, you're not going to go after anything, you lack sense. But the person who recognizes that there's a value of producing something in your work, well, now you're a wise person. Proverbs 14 says, in all toil there is profit. I mean, if you could say that in everything that we put our hands to that is labor and toil and effort, there is some form of profit. Maybe it's not monetary profit, but there's character building, there's growth in skill sets, there's future preparation for life and ministry and career. There's some profit in everything we put our hands to. And I can imagine all of your kids, like I was when I was a high schooler and a junior higher, my mom telling me I got to fold laundry and thinking, what's the point, right? I don't want to learn how to fold dad's underwear, okay? That's not fun. Let's do something else. But there is profit in every aspect of work, right? But the person that just sits around and talks about these things, well, that person is not going to have anything. Even this idea of returning from the exile and going back and building the wall in Nehemiah, the people, they had an idea that what they were doing was good and beneficial. And I love the phrase that says the people had a mind to work, all right? And I would just say it that way. Do you in your house have a mind to work? Does everybody collectively have a culture of, it's good to get up and to work, to put our hands to something, to have a mind for it, to be given to it, and to not be upset about it? To be able to say, yeah, you got to go to work today. What's the big deal? It's fine. We can go. Yeah, it's good. Work's good. It produces things. So here's some ideas of how you can make this a bigger, better thing in your house. Okay? If you are a person that constantly is showing gratitude for the work that you get to do, if you're sitting around your dinner table saying, man, I'm so grateful that we can live in this house and that God has provided this job for me. I'm so grateful that I was able, to get this new job, this new position, that the job that I have makes enough money to cater for our needs. Your kids need to hear that from you, that you value your work. As you sit around the dinner table and you're driving in the car and it's a nice car, you can say, man, I'm really grateful because if I didn't have my job, not everybody has a job, I wouldn't have this car. I love this car. God is so good to us. I'm so grateful for this. Or you find out a friend loses his job and you say, no, I'm really grateful. I just found out my friend, my coworker, this person, they lost their job. They were laid off. I'm so grateful that God has allowed me to work because work is a good thing and it provides for our family. I mean, those are the type of conversations that help your kids see the value of work. Even sitting down and praying as a family together to at least every once in a while in your prayer, verbally express your gratitude to God for your job, for your work. I mean, even if it's you're a mom and you're staying at home, God, thank you that you allow me to do that, to tend to the needs of my household in this home, to put my hand to fruitful labor for these kids and for my husband and for the work you've given me to do here. I mean, they need to hear that so that they can have a value for it. That's it. You will set the stage by casting a vision that work is good and valuable and precious and helpful and beneficial. Also, should just always be talking about, if you have any perks or benefits or things that you, because of your labor that you've done, get you, talk about the benefits of those things. We tend to talk about the things that are hard in our jobs, the things that we don't like to do, the challenges. That's the first things out of our mouth when we come home and talk. And we are setting a culture in our homes where our kids hear problems, problems, problems. Dad doesn't like it. Mom doesn't like it. They wish they can be gone. They're just waiting for a vacation so they can get a break. What do you think that does to our kids' value of work? It suppresses it and makes it think that they want to go live in a van down by the river and do some remote job playing video games. Okay? The more we can elevate our talk and our value in our discussion about work, the more we will create that culture that values work. And last but not least, if you've got a kid that is still willing to do anything with you, do work with your kids and show them the right attitude in the midst of the work. It goes much further than you think it does. To be able to grab any age kid and say, let's do something together, and you have that right attitude. It could be something as simple as cleaning the house or cleaning the car or doing some yard work. If you make it a thing that's enjoyable, and you go out there and you're not like, man, we got to do this today, and you put a smile on your face and let's go do some good work and value that good work. That hard. Let's work hard. Let's build up a sweat. Let's go do something. Let's do it together. Just that culture of you doing it together will change their thinking on work. And I will say, I see this happening in church. I know this is happening in your homes. I'm just saying, let's think about it with some intensity this week, some intentionality to say, are we doing this? Can we improve it? Can we make this better? Okay. Third thing. It's a little strange here. I'll explain it to you. Create needs that are solved by work. Create needs that are solved by work. What do I mean? This is what I mean. Our tendency, especially living in South Orange County, in a generally affluent area, is that we like to provide absolutely everything for our children. That our kids have zero needs, and if they have a problem, we fulfill all of their problems ourselves. So our kids are never without, they never have lack, they never have a problem that they cannot solve, that you will not solve for them by you throwing your hard-earned money and effort at the problem. You will do the work for them, or you will pay the money from the work that you gain from your income to solve the problem for them. Now, we tend to look at that and say, well, that's good, right? When I was a kid, I didn't have it so good, and I want to be a blessing to my children and give them everything that they could need or want. But if your kid does not see the inherent necessity of work to solve a need or a problem, then they're going to have a hard time when they get into the real world to realize that, yeah, you have to do a lot to have that. And if they don't know that in their youth, they're going to come into the workplace and they're just going to think things should be handed to them because they don't get it. They don't get how this works. So what I'm saying here is maybe it would be beneficial for you to heed the comments of the proverb that says, a worker's appetite works for him. His mouth urges him on. I mean, the idea here is that there is some sort of unsatisfied need that is driving a person to work. And maybe in your life, you've felt that because you didn't have an income, you didn't have enough money for food on the table, and it's driven you to be an incredibly hard worker. But what about your kids? Is there anything in their life that they don't have that you haven't provided for them? Maybe it would be beneficial for you to create a bit of a need for them and not just give them everything so that they can have something to work for and make that necessary connection. So what I would say is find ways to force them to see that they have a need. You intentionally withhold something, especially as they get older. You intentionally withhold things, and you say, yeah, if you want that thing, then you got to do boom, 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 boom. Let's make a list. You want a car? Your kids probably kind of intuitively know that you either make enough money or not enough money for a car. And they're maybe assuming mom and dad will just get me a car. What if we had plenty of money to get them a car, but we still just made them work for it because we wanted to create this value in them? We say, we're going to make you work for it. We're going to make you pay this off. You got to get a job. You got to hold it down. You got to do all this stuff because we're creating, you want a car. You have a desire for a car. So you're going to have to work for that car. You want that game console. You're going to have to do something to earn that game console. You want to go on this trip with your friends? Well, I'm going to require you to do something to earn that trip with your friends. Could you give it to them? Yes, you could. But there's something about giving them a connection about the need where you have to create it. If it's not natural and inherent, which in this, like I said, South Orange County, I know not everybody's in the same economic strata here. In this church, we have a diversity, and we're not all level and we're not all equal. But generally speaking, we are at a higher level here in this area than most kids living in a less economically viable area. So those kids by nature realize that if they want something, they're going to have to work for it. Well, our kids don't have that same reality. So this is something that you should think, what is it that I'm just giving my kids that maybe I should say, you're going to have to do something to get that, to create this connection. Fourth thing is this. I think it is essential for whatever your kid is working at, that you require the completion of their work commitments. I don't care if it is putting the dishes away or taking the trash out or going to a 20-hour-a-week job or completing some sort of sports commitment. We can't let our kids do the thing that we're seeing in the culture happen all the time. It's too hard, I give up. I mean, this is going on constantly with young people. I'm stressed. I can't believe this Starbucks has so many customers. I'm going to quit. I mean, it's like, what? It's a Starbucks. Like, our kids need to learn to deal with opposition and stress and difficulty and problems in life generally, because that's what life is, and you know that. I don't have to explain it to you. You know that life is full of complications and problems that you have to persevere through, endure, figure out, solve, and keep going. And you don't have an option for an out. But we tend to let our kids have the out. We tend to allow them to just duck out as soon as any adversity comes. We blame other people for it instead of just saying, stick with it, keep going. So whatever it is that your kid puts their hand to, or you make them do, or you ask them to do, or they commit to, your job as a parent should be to make sure they see it through. They see it through. Whatever they've committed to, if you've committed to work here, you got to set a bare minimum commitment. And I would say this, if your kid is at the age where they're trying to get a job, they're thinking about doing something, they're making commitments, you should set some of those things for them. So if your kid says, hey, I want to get a job, say they get a job here at church, I want to work for facilities. You shouldn't say, okay, that's great, do that, and if you don't like it, we'll talk about it. Or let them do it with no parameters, and then 3 weeks later they come and say, those chairs are heavier than they look, Dad. I don't know if I can do this anymore. You should be directing them in this and saying, hey, if you're going to do this, I want you to give some level of commitment. Let's decide on a time for how long you're going to do this. If you're going to do this, you're going to do it for at least 6 months. You're going to do it for at least 3 months. You're going to do it at least for a year. If you're going to do this, you're going to do it. Because you're teaching them the principles that they need to push through. and complete the task that they're given. Proverbs 13:14. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. The person that keeps going, perseveres, puts their hand in it over and over and over again, that's the person that makes an impact. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. You want your kids to not be the kids that give up, but they're diligent, they persevere, and they keep going. So think about how you could do that in their lives. All right. Last but not least, your kids do need to understand that there is a benefit to working. And I think it's part of your job as a parent to help them see that there is a general principle. They can have benefits from working. You don't just work to pay the bills. You buy yourself stuff every once in a while. You get gifts for your spouse. They get gifts for you. You go and you get a car that you want. You go eat that food that you want. There's a benefit and a reward to hard work. We're obsessed with savings. We want our kids to start off well, right? But our kids should have a sense that if they're doing something, there should be a benefit to it. There should be a natural rhythm between your labor and your reward. And so if you need to sit down and say, hey, I think it's good for you to get this job. Maybe your kid doesn't need a job. Maybe they don't need to work. Maybe they don't need to do these tasks because you've got a gardener or you got this and you don't need it. But to say, I think there's a benefit to doing this. If you do this for me for this long, because you're trying to teach them and train them and develop them to be hard workers, that you should reward them for that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that there's a natural biblical principle to play here. It's the hardworking farmer who ought to have the first share of the crops. If your kid is known for being a hard worker, let them spend it on some stuff that they want to spend it on. Let them get those headphones. Let them get the, green controller. I don't know. What do kids like? Let them get things. Let them get an e-bike. Maybe don't let them get an e-bike. If your kid we're stopping for a minute, okay? If your kid has an e-bike, you better coach them because one day I'm going to yell at them. Okay. I'm okay with it as long as you coach them, not to be dumb. All right. Last but not least on this idea, 1 Thessalonians 4. There is a sense that we are to be people who care for our own stuff, who pursue our own endeavors, and who take care of ourselves. So we're to aspire to live quietly so that no one else is having to do all this stuff for us. There should be a sense of independence. We're training our kids like, yes, I want you to leave my house at some point and be an independent person, or go and be married and be in that relationship and not have to come crawling back to mom and dad. So they should aspire to not need all these other people, to mind our own affairs, to work with our hands, so that you may be able to walk properly before outsiders, so that other people might not come to them and say, man, you're a slouch, you're lazy, but you call yourself a Christian, and that you're not dependent on them. You're able to take care of yourself. It's a biblical principle that you work hard enough to take care of yourself. And early on, kids don't know how much your bills cost and how much things cost in your life, so they need a little bit of an incentive to say, wow, this is kind of cool working, doing things of value because there's a benefit to it. I'm gaining independence. I'm gaining independence from you. I'm gaining some financial freedom. I can make financial decisions on my own to some degree. You're allowing me to get this thing that you said I couldn't have before now that I'm working for it. You're developing some reward system for them, and they need to know that. I think that these are 5 areas that you can just discuss in your small group. I add some additional verses, but I want you guys to apply your own wisdom in this. I know you've done some of this stuff in your own parenting. You've seen other people do it. You've got ideas. And I want there to be a nice discussion tonight about, hey, what is it that you do to help push your kids to think about how to be a hard worker and to fight against this culture that's drawing them in this direction? This is a framework for you to work through of 5 things that I pulled out from some biblical principles, but there's many more. So this can be a platform for you tonight, give you some direction in your conversation. But I hope that this is fruitful for you as you push forward your kids to be people that get out there and get to work. All right, let me pray for us. God, help us first and foremost, to be known in our own homes with our own kids as those who pursue work in the way that you call us to in Colossians, that we are to work heartily, giving it all of our efforts with a zeal and a vigor and a passion behind it, knowing that we don't do it just for a paycheck, just for an income, just because we have to, but because you are the one asking us to, and so we work for you. God, help us to be that example for our kids and help us to think of how to stir up our kids to greater and greater work, to set this as a value because we know you value it. God, we want our kids to see work as something that's good and necessary and beneficial, and to pursue it with all their might. And so, God, I pray that this generation of kids growing up in our church would be the standard that really goes in and flies in the face of the culture, that they would rise above the trends and be known even in the gates of this place to be hard workers. So God, I pray that you would equip each of these parents tonight, help them to come up with good examples and illustrations, and even to take notes tonight in their own groups of things that they could implement to help their kids to get to work. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.